And now, it's time for another Dice Tower review with Tom Vasel.
Hello everybody, I'm Tom Vasel, and I'm going through the different expansions for Project Elite, which is one of my favorite games. This one's Deathmaw Valley, one of the most fearsome animals or monsters to fight, the deadly sandworm, from the giant ones in Dune to the silly ones in Tremors. This is somewhere in between, right? It's bigger than the ones in Tremors and more deadly than those, I suppose, but it's not as giant as the sandworms in Doom. But here you are fighting aliens, and you got this giant sandworm to fight. That is essentially what's in this set. I'll show you a closer look. In this expansion, there are two sides of the board. This one has no arrows on it. That's because everything on it just runs straight across. And this one here has more of a tunnel type aspect to it. You can play through a bunch of missions that use each of these, and they're in the book here. Out for the Worm, The Great Hunt, Rescuing Valley, To Fight Another Day, Destroying the Lair Down Below, etc. Now, this all works with this giant Deathmaw, which is made up of several parts, and the number of parts that you use is going to be based on the number of players in the game. But they're pretty neat because you just snap these together. And once they're together, they actually are a bit of a pain to get apart. Let's put as many here together as we can, just so we can show you the thing in its full glory. This is one of my favorite miniatures for any game ever. It's just a really neat idea. And in fact, I have a tail piece here. So once we get this tail piece in, the whole thing's done. And they even have a little extra thing for Kickstarters with a scorpion tail. But you can see once this is on the board, just look how nasty that looks. That's really cool. And this has its own movement here. You can see it has this 20 health here. Roll one hit die for each hero within. That's the normal Deathmaw. But you have a Deathmaw segments, cards, show you how much health each of the segments in the bodies are and the tail. But then there's a special Deathmaw activation deck when you're using it, and it will tell you essentially how it moves, and then if it's going to attack from the side, if it's going to dig attack, which means it goes under the earth and comes back out again, if it hits from the head. And so it's kind of just moving around the board. You move the head and it's coming at you. Now, this is pretty nasty and deadly. However, players have other ways to fight it. So there's a bunch of new equipment cards that you can use. Some are only used in this game, like the Thumper here, because the Thumper will attract the Deathworm to it. But there's landmines, laser turrets, flamethrowers, missile turrets, etc. And all of these actually have different pieces for them. So you can use these in different games. But there's something neat about setting these up. Now, the problem is you have to find them in a normal game, so they're not as handy as you might think. But I will say that if you play with these in the scenario itself, that's going to start with some of them already set up. And so they're pretty neat. I really like how they look. They add to the game, they add to the fun. And of course, the Deathmaw is a very memorable monster, and these scenarios are pretty cool. That's pretty much all that's included in this set. It's all about fighting this one nasty creature. There's a bunch of other tiles in the set, small objective tokens that you will add to the game, a few other tiles, starting areas, and a crash ship, etc. But this scenario is just about the Deathmaw. This one is an outlier. I would only get this if you want to fight the sandworm. There's not a lot here that can be thrown into base game. Yes, you have the different miniatures and the missile launchers and flamethrowers, and that's all well and cool. But I don't know how often you would use those in a regular game. This is about getting this one specific scenario. This looks and feels almost like a Kickstarter stretch goal. I love Project Elite. I love playing different scenarios for it, but I don't know how often I would play with the sandworm. It's cool, like I said. It is seriously one of the coolest miniatures I've ever seen for a game. It's flexible, it's wormy. That's just really neat. I love this concept a lot. And, I mean, I think it would be a fun one to have painted and stuff, but it's really just this kind of there's a bunch of scenarios, but this is for the most die-hard of Project Elite fans. At least that's what I think. Anyway, that gives you a closer look at it. Project Elite, Deathmaw Valley.